Hi, my name is Will, and welcome to the Distorted Transmission for this week. It's a little bit of a weird one. A mate of mine called Denver has come over from Australia. He just did a bit of a techno show the other night. Came along, went along and watched that. It was amazing, as always. He's just drinking some tea right now, getting in the zone. Yeah, I've known Denver for about, how long? 30 years?
It must be, yeah.
Yeah.
90s.
Have you actually done many of these sort of interviews, like in front of a camera before?
No. This must be the first one, actually.
Cool.
I've done a lot of audio ones, but yeah, not a video one.
No pressure then.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, because we go back to the mid-90s, just want to say that when we were both like 3 years old.
That's right. Yeah. Before we were born, we used to hang out. This interview series is usually sort of involved with distorted music, like things with distorted guitars, things like that. So this is a little unusual. But I kind of psychologically got my head around trying to segue you in by the fact that the first album you released was distorted. It had distorted kicks in it. And of course, before that, you're a metal guitarist. So I figured that maybe we could start right at the beginning with your sort of musical foundation, if you like. So I was talking to a mate of mine the other night, and he mentioned that you're in a band called Blueprint, apparently, which is a band that I'd never heard of. But apparently it was a band that you're in. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about Blueprint and sort of start from there.
It was a school band, and there was myself. It was put together for a particular Battle of the Bands competition.
Right.
And it was at the town hall. And so who was in the band? There was the drummer, Peter, who was also at our same college, St. Peter's College. And had Kevin, who was the other guitarist. And we had a guy named Jamie, who was the bass player. And we didn't have a vocalist. So
it was like an instrumental thing.
Pretty much.
Okay.
And yeah, not out of choice. It's just we couldn't find anyone to sing.
Right.
And yeah. So we practiced 2 songs. One of them was an original and one of them was a cover for this town hall gig. And this town hall gig was packed with people. It was like actually like being at a real concert, you know. So anyway, we played there. We didn't place or anything. The funny moments that I remember is we played the first one, which was an original, and then the second one was this was a Metallica cover. So it was
Was it Fade to Black?
It was Fade to Black. Yes. And the funny thing was our bass player introduced it. You know, we were all terribly, you know, stage shy, and so he got up and said, "This next one is an original, Fade to Black." And everyone's like, Metallica. I always wondered, why did he say that? Of course, the first one was the original, not the second one. So we probably
just
stage fright.
So just to be clear, Fade to Black was not an original. Is that what you're saying? There was another band who was in that particular competition, and that was when you met Josh, who was the guitarist from Power Jelly.
Right. For that competition, they were called the Elvis Rice Band.
Was it the Elvis Rice Experience?
Oh, no, the Elvis Rice Experience, yeah. And they were also a school band. I think they were mainly from Green Bay High School, is that what it was? And they were just incredible. Not musically, but just their stage presence was
The attitude.
The attitude, I'd never seen anything like it. Like we were taking this whole experience quite seriously, but those guys just didn't even seem to care. And so there was some intense things going on stage.
The story I heard was that during sound check, they trashed all the gear like rock stars did in the 1960s, 1970s, right? Like the whole smashing the drum set, and then they were kicked out. And then they came back because they were short a band then. So they in the same day,
right?
They went out, they changed their name, they came back and auditioned as a different band.
Oh,
and smashed all the gear up a second time. and then were properly kicked out for a second time, and that was the end of that. So, and the guitarist was a guy called Josh, who, of course, which we'll get to later on, also connected to the Krishna stuff you got into. That was partially, I'd say, possibly from his influence, because he was sort of into the Krishna stuff first, I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, so Blueprint happened. That gig happened. Obviously, you didn't win.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably no gear to play on because the other bands had smashed the shit out of everything. So then at some point you must have formed Power Jelly, which was like a thrash band, pseudo thrash band, thrash rock band.
Yeah, yeah.
Which had you were the lead guitarist, I believe. And
Well, it was like an Iron Maiden type thing, like 2 lead guitarists type thing with Josh. And we had a vocalist, bass player.
oh, thank
Matt.
God.
Yeah.
Finally.
And Peter carried on from Blueprint to be the drummer of Power Jelly.
Right.
Yeah.
And for people who don't know who Peter is, Peter became DJ CXL, probably one of New Zealand's most famous hip hop DJ guys. He was in Ill Semantics. Yeah, quite a legend in his own right. Another guy who was in a metal band and went on to do something different, much like you did.
Yeah, right.
Cool. Okay, so there's you and Josh and Pete and what was the bassist name?
Matt.
That's right. Matt Burling. Wasn't
Correct.
And you formed Power Jelly, and that was I think that was about the time that I met you, because we used to play power station gigs and stuff together. And sort of became part of that little scene.
So what was the name of your band at that time?
I think at the time I was Bastard Squad.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Although there was another Bastard Squad somewhere else in the country, and there's been a bit of confusion about that.
Oh, okay.
But whatever. We were probably the not famous one. So after the sort of the thrash metal thing, something happened at some point, and you kind of got over that metal stuff, and you got into techno, and I never really knew how you transitioned from one to the other. So maybe we could delve into that.
I must have still been in school, or just close to leaving school. But someone took me to a nightclub, to like a rave, as they used to call it back then. And it was my first rave experience. And, it meant, producing like a fake ID, because we're all underage, to get into this nightclub. You had to be 18. Actually, I remember one night the police were pulling everyone out and checking their IDs. So I had my fake ID where in the photo I looked like I was 14 years old. Like it was my school photo. and there was a school ID that said, that I was 20 or something like that. I mean, that's ridiculous. How can a 20-year-old still be in secondary school? But anyway, so the policeman said, what's your birth date? And I couldn't remember what I'd put. And so I said, it's 20th of March, 1977. And he says, this is 76. And I said, that's what I said, 76. And I just held to my story. And he kept saying, no, you didn't. You said 70. I said, no, I said 76. And then after a couple of minutes that, he just gave it back to me, and I went back inside. It was like, I don't know how that happened, but...
Well, I mean, cops used to be a lot more chill back in the day. I remember I was in the back seat drunk out of my mind when I was about 14, and 17-year-old was driving. He was also drunk. And we got pulled over in Wellington, and we all sort of fell out of the car. I remember them yelling in the window, get out of the car, get out of there. And I sort of like came to consciousness and staggered out. The guy in the driver's seat managed to talk his way out, say, oh, yeah, like these guys called me, they're drunk, he's my younger brother, and they asked me to come and pick them up and take them up, and he was trashed. And the cops went, oh, yeah, fair enough. No breathalyzer, nothing at all.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what was that? That was the late 80s. So I would assume the early 90s were no better.
Yeah, got it.
So getting into techno.
Yeah, so that was my first rave, and I guess it was like very different from a metal gig, right? The atmosphere, people dancing, everyone dancing, and there's this sort of very kind of happy vibe, and people smiling at you probably because they're on ecstasy or whatever. And it was just a very different experience, and the contrast was quite telling.
I would say especially since there are actually people there, because most of the
Yeah,
metal shows.
that's the other thing. Yeah, yeah. Like all of the metal gigs that we did, there was a few people in the front, and then emptiness behind that. So
Mostly our girlfriends and the other bands
yeah,
went to play. Yeah.
yeah. Lots of attractive girls, and so the whole thing was just wow. This is where have we been? Why haven't we gotten into this before?
And there it is.
Yeah.
It explains so much now.
Yeah. I don't know how quickly it was, but I started to research, well, okay, because I worked in Kingsley Smith's music shop, right? So I started to research, okay, how did they go about making this stuff? So I was able to immediately, check out the stuff they had at Kingsley Smith's and work out what I needed. And I started to amass a little bit of equipment. That first rave, they played a certain style of music, and it was very like underground at the time, but also very kind of happy, yeah, very very happy stuff. Influence from the culture, I imagine. That sort of everyone wants to be on this happy high kind of thing.
Right.
So
well, that's certainly not what your first album was.
Yeah.
Was it Driving Dark?
Yeah.
Hurricane.
Yeah, so there was another style of techno that was also there, which was that kind of harder, distorted stuff.
Sort of gabberish.
Yeah, which is what my friends and myself, we kind of gravitated to. And so with my kind of metal background, I kept all of my distortion pedals, and I would just run the kick drums through that and various other synthesizers and stuff to get that kind of hard edge sound. So yeah, there was two kind of scenes running simultaneously. This one kind of happy techno thing which was going on, which attracted the masses. But within that, there was a small group of us who were kind of, liking the kind of more distorted stuff, the harder stuff, the faster stuff, harder, faster, heavier type stuff.
Yeah, I remember when you were living in, I think it was Springfield. Yeah, you sort of went in the front door, you went up the stairs, and on the left-hand side was your bedroom. And it was a little bedroom, and it had pretty much nothing in it. It was very bare. Like, I don't even think you had a bed. Did you have a mattress or something?
Yeah, maybe just a mattress.
And a little table, and you just had a whole bunch of just musical crap just piled on, like a little
drum machine, yeah.
Little drum machine, a little keyboard and something, and just a whole shitload of wires. And
the mixer.
Yeah,
and a mixer with some
like
effects.
A Boss HM2.
Yeah, HM2, that was it.
Yeah. And just the kick running through it, just gong. And you were quite often writing music. It would be running, and then you'd be hungry, and then you'd go out to the kitchen and make yourself something to eat, or maybe we'd all be playing hacky sack in the living room, but you would never like stop the music. So quite often, if you're writing something, it would be like 1 or 2 bars long, and it would just be looping, and it would just loop for hours, just with the bang, gang, gang. Yeah, so I mean, I definitely remember those days, because there was this background sort of soundtrack of just this two bar loop.
Yes, right.
Distorted kick.
Yeah, you just sort of kind of leave it on the burner, so to speak, and see what comes to mind. And it was very kind of making that stuff is you kind of jam out for a bit with loops, and then if something sticks, then you kind of create a sort of an intro and a middle and a peak and an end,
right,
gradually.
Out of everything you've ever written, I would confess that the first album is my favorite, because it's that much more aggressive.
Yeah, right. A few people have said that to me. So yeah, I've joked that should have been the one that got the award.
So you had the drum machine, and you had what a keyboard were you using at that point?
I didn't buy anything new. I got all this synth secondhand, because these were all old synthesizers from the 80s that were now being used for techno. So they weren't producing those synths anymore, so it was all just secondhand market stuff.
And at that time, because those synths were sort of like popular about 5 or 10 years beforehand, they were being sold quite cheaply.
They were cheaper,
because nobody wanted them.
Yeah, exactly.
They hadn't become iconic techno keyboards yet.
Well, in New Zealand, they hadn't. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff you could find cheap. I remember I picked up an 808 for, I don't know, it was like $100 or something. That same drum machine, I heard a friend buy in the early 2000s for $5,000. So I regret so much, like, not keeping that stuff, because it'd be worth so much. They're collector's pieces now, right?
Not to mention the HM2. Worth a fortune.
I think they're still producing that. I think you can still buy that new.
Definitely are.
Yeah. So I just got whatever synths I could afford at the time, and that were available. There was a very tight knit techno community, so we would share gear, would lend gear to people. Different synths and drum machines had different sounds, so they'd lend you a piece of gear, and you'd lend them a piece of gear, and so you'd have a different sound for a while in your studio.
So how were you actually recording this stuff at home? Because there were no like DAWs, there were no DAWs back then.
Yeah, we weren't using computers for recording, but digital audio tape was kind of the standard for recording, mastering any music to. If you're going to send it to a studio for pressing, either vinyl or CD, then you'd have to give them a digital audio tape master, DAT tape. So I think in the beginning, whenever I needed to record something, I would borrow someone's DAT recorder. But then I eventually bought my own. And started. That was an important piece of kit, right? Because unless you had that, you could only record it to a cassette, which is, you can't play a cassette in a club. So you needed to have this access to a digital audio tape recorder. So
what were you using to do the sequencing on?
So at times I could just use like the sequencer that was built into the drum machine and the sequencer that was built into the keyboard, and just sync them together.
Right.
I think we did a couple of tracks like that.
Sure.
When you came over one time, we were mucking around.
But you had some kind of computer that was sort of running it all. What was that?
Yeah, so there was a stage when I eventually got a computer sequencer. I can't remember if it was a Commodore or an Amiga. One of the two. And it was running, a very simple version of Cubase back then. Yeah. It's very different now, right?
It's pretty bare bones back then. But I think that's what that's some of the appeal of the stuff back then. Like, you really had to cowboy everything.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
You really had to, like, it was all pioneer stuff. You couldn't just download a free version of Reaper and then ta-da, you've got your own studio. It was like you had to like think outside the box. Like when I was doing drum and bass stuff, I used to just like I'd get like an amplifier, a stereo amplifier, plug the speakers into the microphone at the front, and then just turn up the microphone. It would just go and would like distort.
Oh yeah. And you'd sample that.
Yeah, and then sample that out and like do it a few times and try to get some interesting sounds out of it before you blew the amp up. Because hopefully you didn't do that because you didn't have another one. And you couldn't afford another one. And then just like get a whole bunch of interesting sounds. And then sometimes, if you were lucky, they would like translate into songs or bass lines or whatever. So it was interesting. It was more interesting back then. There were no preset downloadable synths that you could just VSTs you could just throw into it.
A lot of experimentation, right? A
lot of it.
Yeah. The cover imagery was very dark and very metal, really. It's quite,
it's right there, in fact.
Okay. So like dark black with silver. And my friend Aaron Stradwick did the cover design, and even the titles. Look, Destroying Angel, We Are the Sons of Sorrow. It was all very, very metal, right?
I was just going to hold it up to the camera so people can see it. Yeah.
I was really showing my metal influence there, definitely.
very, very much so.
We wanted to make a point of it that it was not the happy hardcore vibe.
There's even an atheist a sample in there that bow.
That is that was from a band called Cynic.
No, it's atheist.
Is it Atheist?
Yeah. Oh, was it?
I feel like it was Cynic.
God.
I feel like we can double check that later.
Yeah,
you can make an edit.
I'll insert it now.
Yeah.
Something must have happened between the first album and the second album, because the second album was a lot more pleasant. It was a lot more tranquil.
Melodic.
There was no distorted kick.
Yeah.
I mean, there was some gain on the kick, but it wasn't like gung gung, you know. So it was a completely different beast. And when I actually heard that album, I was expecting Morning Star 2.
Right.
And I was like, what the hell's this? Where's all the heavy gone? I mean, it's a great album in its own right, but at the time, my expectation, you know when like your favorite band brings out the next album and it's not what you're expecting. You're sad. It was like Your Load, basically.
Okay.
It wasn't. It was more like Your Justice, I guess, because all the bass had gone, you know, all the distortion had gone. But yeah, it was a cool album. And then,
but yeah, very different. Yeah.
So why did you decide to sort of, was that just your vibe?
Morning Star was like 93.
Okay.
And Inside a Quiet Mind was 98.
5-year gap.
Right. Yeah.
4 or 5.
And yeah, the scene and the kind of music that our little techno community was into had changed. We had moved away from the super fast and hard stuff, and this is all because of the influences from overseas records that were coming in,
and possibly
new
also
sounds.
Growing up a bit as well.
That's it. Yeah, growing up,
not being an angry 18-year-old anymore or whatever.
Exactly. More drugs mellowed us out.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and I suppose at that point you'd also listen to a lot of mainstream techno and, you know, trance and all that. Whereas before you were listening to a lot of metal, now you're listening to a lot of trance. You're sort of involved in that world a bit more. So the influences, as you said, would have probably leached in a bit. Yeah.
So when it came to doing that one, it was like I was still doing some harder stuff at the same time. But I chose, specifically those tracks because they just fit well together. And I guess I wanted to do something different from the first one, showcase like a different style.
You also had like different equipment. I remember you had some kind of recording hard drive, because in the first song there's that because because you could actually like take parts of the song and then reverse them.
Yes, yeah.
And it's in that first song, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. No, yeah, you've got a good memory. So that was that Akai DR4 hard disk recorder. So that kind of reversing stuff you could only do with a computer and with expensive software, which I didn't have access to. But I picked up that DR4, I think, from Kingsley Smith's maybe at a good price. And there was a few things that was literally playing the song through that unit and just using the jog wheel to reverse it, recording it into the DAT, and then going back and inserting it over the track. So it was, again, experimentation.
Cowboy.
Yeah. So yeah, the equipment had evolved.
So what were some of the venues you played at back in the day? Because most of them are gone now. There was the Box. I remember going into the Box a few times.
Yeah. That was kind of like our weekly go-to place.
Which street was that on?
That was
High Street?
So that's High Street.
High
Yeah.
Street, yeah.
We were all still underage for a long time, and they just let us come down because we were just part of the music scene, and you know, they knew that we were, you know, writing techno and creating techno, and they were just very supportive of what we were doing, which was great. You know, it gave us an outlet to play some of our stuff, and having that support. You know, otherwise we would have no kind of place to play it. I guess outside of the box, a lot of people were organizing the big kind of warehouse parties. That was a thing back then as well. And you know, just at people's houses in the weekend, different places like that.
I used to always get hit on when I went down to the box. I remember, which is why
I never used to get hit on.
I think I only went down there like twice. Both times, some dude would single me out. It was always dudes. It was like I've never been picked up by a woman ever. It was always dudes, and I was a metal guy. If anybody can imagine that, you know, I had like longish hair,
Right.
you know, 21 maybe, and you know, my Metallica shirt on or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was, you know, being a metal guy, I wasn't a dancer. I wasn't, you know,
Right.
grooving with everybody else.
Right.
So I'd sort of go down there all sort of staunch and then just sit on the bass bins and just enjoy the music, because I was into the beats, being a drummer, right?
Yeah.
So I'd be enjoying it, and then before you know it, some dude would start snaking his way, you know, like this, start snaking his way, and I remember the guy. He was very well dressed, and he had this beard. I don't know how old he was. He was probably like late 20s, maybe early 30s. He just started sneaking over and he just kept dancing around me, and I was just and I was like smiling at him, going, you know, no, I'm not into it, man. Trying to just look at you on stage, and then every time I looked back, he was still. He was thinking, oh, maybe if I just persevere, I can take him home. And so I stopped going to the box, because every time I went there, some weird creepy dude would come and try to hit on me, you know.
Right.
I mean, I don't mind gay dudes at all, but I just wish they wouldn't, you know. If you say, look, I'm not into it. If they just go, okay, that's cool, and then just leave, that'd be great. But
Right.
But they'd be like, no, you know, I can change you. And it was horrible. So yeah, I sort of stopped going. But the gigs that I went to, aside from the weird dude dancing around my legs, the shows are great, and it had a really, really good like PA there. Like the basements were fucking massive.
Yeah. There was a good system. Yeah. So actually, Inside a Quiet Mind, also, I didn't release under the same, you know, name as Morningstar. So I changed the name slightly.
True.
So it went from Mechanism to Micronism. Yeah.
Was there actually a reason for that?
Yeah, because I didn't want to release it as Mechanism, because it was completely different style, right? And to upset the Mechanism fans.
To let people down.
Or upset the Mechanism fan. So yeah, I decided to change the name, but you know, it's very similar sounding, so it was, you could kind of connect the two.
Sort of an evolution of an idea.
Yeah. Oh, that's the other thing we should mention, is that you did some work on Inside a Quiet Mind.
I did.
Yeah.
Yes. Without me. Okay, so
let me tell the story.
Yep.
Yeah. So then I'd moved to Kingsland, and it was literally just a few doors down from the Cog studio where they'd moved to. And I remember you had gotten the MPC at that point, the Echo MPC.
The MPC, I think it was at 2000.
Yeah.
It cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
It was like $2,000 or something.
Yeah.
Crazy money.
Yeah. So you brought that over, and we started jamming out, and we finished the track that evening. I remember thinking, this is a cool track.
I think we only really sat down and bummed around for maybe two hours.
Yeah.
And it was all done.
Yeah.
I'd just gotten the Akai about 2 weeks or 3 weeks prior to that, and I barely knew how to use it.
Right.
So I was really nervous because, you know, like you said, oh, you should just come and do a collab sometime. And like, I'd never done a collab with anybody. I'd barely started learning the gear myself.
Yeah.
And it's you who has already released, you know, Morningstar, and you're quite, you know, the guy in the scene. So I was like, Jesus Christ, that's not much pressure. And then I arrived there, and then you were like, hey man, like we should just smoke a little weed and just like get in the zone. So I was like, so I didn't want to be a prude and go, well, you know, I'm just here to work. So I thought, well, maybe it'll help. And we smoked some weed, And I was
Just for the record, I didn't inhale.
That's right. This is all a fantasy story, but like I was not much of a weed smoker.
Neither.
Yeah, so you know, I cut a couple of tokes and I was fucked.
Right.
I could barely see the NPC, and I was trying to get like the right samples, and I couldn't figure it out, and I was just lost it because it was all like floppy disks, and
Yeah, right.
I was trying to load this shit up, and I was like, how does it work again?
I had no idea you were going through all that. Oh my God.
So I have no idea how that actually worked out. It actually came out pretty well. There is a snare at one point in that song that hits over a bass drum.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
And that was just because I was so wasted I couldn't undo it.
Right.
So so we sat down and you plugged.
We had to sync it up, right?
Yeah,
we had
the
to sync
echo
it,
with some other stuff. I let you deal with that because I didn't know what was going on. And so I tried to write some beats. We figured out the BPM, and I wrote some beats to that. It's probably 120 BPM or something because
it's
just default.
That one was 108 or something. 9.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
it was slower because it was one of the slower ones on the album.
Cool. Well, that's good, isn't it? That means we at least managed to figure out how to change the BPM on the thing. And then I just wrote some beats, and then you just started noodling over it, and then you developed something, and you're like, oh, this is cool, and then you just started tracking and layering it, and then before you know it, it was done.
Yeah. And, I did a minor edit afterwards on the hard disk recorder. So I loaded the whole track in, and the very last section of it, I went too wild on the synths, and so I had to loop the first, like there's two sections, there's this one, and the second one wasn't good, so I just looped the first section.
Okay.
That was the only editing I did on it. But I really liked that track. It was like it had this really nice mood. I mean, I played it the other night, you know. It sounded great.
It was the first time I'd ever heard the track, or actually, to be honest, any of those tracks.
Yeah, right.
In a live environment.
Yeah, right.
It's quite different.
Yeah. That was the only song on that album that I did as a collaboration, but it just fit so well with the rest of the material, and it was such a good song. That just like came up. We were just jamming, and it just came out, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
well, I've always wanted to like do more collabs with you, but it seems that really those kind of collabs you can only really do in the same room. Like you can't just like, oh, here's a drum beat, and fire it off to Australia, and you go, oh, let's add some stuff.
Yeah.
You kind of need that kind of, first you need to be stoned and barely know your instruments.
Yeah.
And then it all happens.
A lot of factors involved there.
All right, so on to the next thing is the Krishna stuff, which is probably the next phase of your life, I guess. Josh from Power Jelly, again, he raises
he makes an appearance again.
He rears his ugly head, and he got into the Krishna stuff, and kind of, I don't know if influence is the right word, but sort of like you got sort of attracted to it as well. How did you get into it, and what did you end up doing with it at the beginning?
Inside a Quiet Mind, if you look at all of the kind of the themes, the song titles, I mean, Inside a Quiet Mind, what is that? What does that mean? What is that talking about? It was around the time I was looking into different kind of, I guess, religious or spiritual traditions. And so that's where that language comes from, like meditative practices, quietening the mind, so that what's left is the experience of just the observer, or of the thoughts, and so I was becoming interested in these things because I started to meet Hare Krishna devotees on the street, and they would sell me books. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of walking down the street.
They usually avoid me.
Oh, do they?
For some reason, but
you have seen them, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that was a common experience for a lot of people walking down Queen Street, right, and getting approached by the Hare Krishnas. So I had a whole stack of their books. I never read them. Sometimes I would open them briefly, but I had a whole stack. And then what kind of made me think a little bit more into it was that Josh, who I played in a band in for a long time, was a good friend for many years, but we kind of separated when I went into the techno thing. I discovered a few years later that he had become a Hare Krishna devotee.
Mm.
And so, what even is that? I didn't even know what that was, really. So I went round to his house, and what was his, when we used to do band practices and stuff, his room was full of metal posters and guitar amps and guitars. But now it was just a completely empty room with nothing in the room except for a bookcase full of Hare Krishna books. And there wasn't even a bed in there. And I was like, where do you sleep, man? He goes, I sleep on the floor now. And he'd shaved his head and it was, wearing the robes and stuff.
But that's Josh, right? Everything to 120%, right?
Yeah. Turn it up to 11.
Now he's bodybuilding.
He's doing bodybuilding, yeah.
At 120%.
So I was like, wow, this is far out, he's really getting into this. And he started to explain to me something a little bit about the philosophy more. And it just inspired me to look a little bit more deeper into it. Like you have this friend, a good friend, a friend you trust and you've been a friend with for a long time, and he's taken this path. It's like, okay, this is interesting. Let me have a look and see what he's getting into. And so with that, I started to, he invited me to a couple of the, I guess the meetings, you call it, at a place called The Loft in Newmarket. And it was kind of like going to the nightclub the first time. It was like, what is this? This whole new experience of this kind of tight-knit community, but their kind of lifestyle and cultural values were very different. They're, looking for this higher kind of lifestyle. And it was exactly like being exposed to the nightclub the first time. It was just a stark contrast. And so it intrigued me, and I just decided to pursue it more. And then a year after releasing Inside a Quiet Mind, then I'd moved into the Hare Krishna ashram, just because this community, it seemed to have something special there that I was gravitating to. Very similar to moving out of the middle kind of, stage of things. So that's looking back on it now, that was kind of how the experience was.
So then you sort of went off and you went to South America, is that right? You did a
missionary thing? Yeah. So I lived with Josh in an ashram in Wellington for a year. And then Josh and his wife were going to South America to live in a Hare Krishna temple there and to take care of book distribution, Hare Krishna book distribution over there, as well as some other services that they had there. And they asked me if I wanted to go. And my spiritual teacher at that time said, yeah, I think that's a good idea. It'll be a good challenge for you. And it was an incredible experience. We were there for 3 years in Peru. We lived in a couple of different temples there, helping to run the temple, like day-to-day kind of runnings of a Hare Krishna temple. And that lifestyle meant waking up very early in the morning, 3:30, 4 o'clock, and then doing a couple of hours of meditation, and then an hour of, studying the scriptures, and then having some breakfast, and then doing services around the temple, going out on the street and chanting, sharing the philosophy with other people. And so, yeah, that was my life for another 4 or 5 years after that. And I met my wife there in Peru, and we came back and settled in Brisbane in 2005. So from that time, I just left behind, all of the techno stuff. I sold all of that equipment, and it was really quite a quick transition. Very similar to when I, transitioned out of metal into techno.
Right.
So, yeah. So, and Josh and I, we still, are practicing Krishna devotees, and a couple of hours of meditation each day. And it just, for me, there's something, like we do music, but it's always together with
it's Krishna music though.
Yeah,
so
the chanting.
Krishna.
Exactly.
All over the top of it. And
yeah.
That was what that was the kind of electronic music you were sort of releasing, or like in the later stages. But like the sort of Hare Krishna faith aside, do you dabble in music anymore in any way sort of outside the Krishna realm? Because it's kind of hard to do anything separated from that, right? Like you can't really do stuff. Everything has to be kind of devoted toward Krishna in some way, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I want to change the angle of that, but it's as a Christian, as a person, you can do whatever you like, right? But it's just that, most Krishna devotees that they discover something very special in the mantra, in the spiritual practices, that it's so attractive that you don't want to do anything else. Actually, it's just that there's something special in it. So I find it difficult to do stuff without the Krishna aspect of it added in it, because there's just a special taste there in that. So I haven't done any, maybe 2 or 3 tracks I've produced in the last 20 years, electronic stuff.
Right.
But otherwise, musically, my outlet is this musical form called kirtan, which I think you've been to a kirtan maybe before, or at least
I think I have.
yeah,
A
you've been
long time
exposed.
ago.
You've been exposed to it because you see the Krishnas chanting in the street. So that is kirtan, which is it's kind of like a devotional music, and it simply involves the repetitive chanting of Hare Krishna, and usually like a call and response. So someone leads the chant, and then the audience responds, and it goes backwards and forwards like that. So I do that every weekend.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's enough.
in Brisbane, some groups of people, maybe 10, maybe 30 people every weekend, and that's kind of like my musical outlet these days. I certainly couldn't drop music, but it needs to be connected with Krishna these days. That's just my taste. Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
it's your musical journey.
yeah.
Wherever it takes you.
Oh.
All right. The last thing to touch on is that you're getting an award, I believe, on Tuesday, which is technically tomorrow. So what's the deal with that award?
Look, I hadn't even heard of that particular award. It's called the Dylan Taite, or John Taite, Dylan Taite, Independent Music Award, the Classic Album Award, which is an award they give to a particular album that was produced in the last 20 years, which they consider, they have a panel of people and they consider to be a classic record. So they just sent me an email out of the blue maybe a month ago, telling me that I'd won this award. It's like, what? This CD that we pressed, 500 copies of when it was first released in 1998. And it's just like, you get an email saying that this thing that you did 20 years ago has won this award.
Well, at least it wasn't push, eh? Tripping on you. At least they sort of delved beyond the sort of the mainstream stuff, which is what most awards go to,
Right.
And they've gone into like the sort of like the more underground. So somebody must have been paying attention.
Yeah, it's for independent releases, so I guess it's like all of the commercial stuff. I think there's another kind of awards for
independent, right? Okay.
Yeah. There's another a franchise for the more commercial acts. I don't know what it's called. Maybe New Zealand Music Awards as opposed to Independent New Zealand Music Awards.
Okay.
And so that was just like really strange for to hear that it had gotten that award.
Just sort of out of the blue.
Yeah.
Well, it's cool though.
It's amazing. Like it's like to be acknowledged for your kind of contribution.
Someone put on the bookshelf, eh?
Yeah. So the people who were involved with that originally were Cog Transmissions, Chris Chetland, who also has a very big metal rock connection, also doing electronic music and a lot of metal industrial stuff. A lot of the credit goes to those guys because they were just very generous and with their time and their energy, and that Cog Transmissions, they built their whole studio on with their student loans, and they're still going to this day. Chris is still doing a lot of work, producing artists. So without those kind of key people in the scene, it's I would have never have gotten this kind of recognition for that CD I did 20 years ago. Yeah, so very grateful for everyone that was involved there at COG.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, I guess that's about all the time we have.
Cool.
For how long have we been chatting? About 3 hours?
It must be, at least.
It's probably the longest conversation we've had in years. All right, Devon, thank you very much for your chat tonight.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, all the best with your award tomorrow.
Thank you. Are you coming?
Yeah, sure. If you'd like me to come, I'd be happy to come.
That'd be great.
No, I'll sit in the aisle seat and.
That'd be great.
Cool.
It'd be great to have you there.
I think it's great that you got that award, because I think you're a lovely guy, and you're very deserving of it, because you are in many ways a very humble guy. Like you never really got into music to get fame or anything. You just like followed this internal sort of desire to like make music, and I think a lot of people benefited from it. People who enjoyed your music, and obviously whoever's given you the award obviously knew who you were and enjoyed the album, and so you sort of like your music probably improved other people's lives, like gave a little bit of color from time to time, which is what music's all about. So very deserving, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't know how it won the award. Like, there's lots of other artists.
Well,
that I think of.
That's the kind of humble thing I'm talking about. Like, you're about to receive an award, and you're like, I don't even understand why. Why?
I honestly think that it's the only possible explanation is that Krishna's hand is there, because otherwise, how is it even possible?
It's probably like a diversity thing.
Yeah, or that, one of the two.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Catch you later.
Thank you. Thanks. All right, that was great.